So I've spent hours laboring over what I could say to introduce this video, but could anything I say really do any justice for how cool monster designs are? I love monster designs. They are just so gosh darn cool, and I think most people can agree there's nothing quite like a well-designed monster to get you excited for something. I mean, who wants to watch a horror movie with a monster that looks like this? And would Dark Souls be as fun as it is with monsters that look like this? A well-designed monster can make us sprint to our rooms when we've turned out all the lights because what if? And I think that speaks volumes to the power these monsters have on our imaginations, and that's worth celebrating. I've spent weeks thinking about what this video could be, and I think at the end of the day, I just want to make a video that honors monsters and monster designs. So in this video, I want to cover the spectrum of monster designing from the grotesque to the adorable, what I think are some solid foundations for monster design, and talk about my favorites that I think make really good examples of those, and see what characteristics you love in monsters, and then we're going to design a monster based on your direct feedback. So let's just do it. After spending weeks chained to my desk and obsessing over monster designs, I've come up with 5 pillars of what I think make up the foundation of good monster designing. So in no particular order, we have believability, environment, function, emotional response, and the mystery factor. Woo! All right, say it with me. Believability and fantasy are not mutually exclusive. Suspension of disbelief is a tightrope that has to be walked by fantasy writers and designers constantly. Too much realism, and now you've got a monster working a 9 to 5, coming home to a rundown apartment, sitting itself in front of a TV and falling asleep to Adult Swim until it wakes up and does it all over again. Too much fantasy, and now you've got a big what? Somewhat paradoxically, believability in fantasy pulls people deeper into your world and helps them digest what they're seeing without pulling them out of it because you've asked them to spend too much of their disbelief. And I think Monster Hunter walks this tightrope perfectly. Monster Hunter is a Japanese action role-playing game that's always felt a bit like, yeah, the plot is here, but hey kid, take this sword and go turn some animals into your clothes. I love Great Jagras' goofy banana hair. I love how the Paolumu looks like it just shot for Vogue. I love the simplicity of the Anjanath in conveying its T-Rex inspiration. And of course, like, there's the iconic Rathalos, like I have to mention Rathalos. But crucially, although clearly remaining monsters in the vein of fantasy, they all still feel believable. So let's take a look at one of my favorites, Tobi-Kadachi, and break down how it's designed. Tobi-Kadachi definitely looks like a fantasy monster when we look at it as a whole, but if we break it down, we can see that it's made up of mainly 2 animals that already exist on Earth, the viper and the flying squirrel. What's basically going on here is the design team took some common Earth things and mixed them in a fantasy pot, stirred it up a bit, tasted it, and said, that's nice. Now, Tobi-Kadachi flies by using a membrane, much like a flying squirrel already does, and its membrane looks very believable on its reptilian design because we already have a lot of associations with membranes and reptiles. This makes its ability to fly believable, so our immersion is never broken. Putting together existing creatures and exaggerating their features to monstrous proportions is a common play for Monster Hunter. We can believe Tobi-Kadachi's huge fluffy tail because of how its body is proportioned and because huge fluffy tails already exist on Earth. And we can believe its quick movements because we're already familiar with vipers striking fast and squirrels climbing trees quickly. The viper aspect is sold by its head, belly, and the snakeskin texture on its body, while the squirrel aspect is sold by its tail, fur, and legs. The balance of this pairing shows the mastery of the design team because they really do make some of the most believable fantasy monsters I've ever seen. Like, look at it. It's just so cool. Believability in fantasy is always a push and pull. And sometimes you want a monster to be more believable, but sometimes you want a monster that's more fantastical. The trick is finding the balance and incorporating a blend between the two that makes sense for your fantasy world. You know what else is so gosh darn cool? When a monster looks like a product of their environment, which not only makes the monsters more believable, but makes the environment look more fleshed out as well. A great example of this is the Leshen from The Witcher 3. The Leshen is this tall, lanky, tree-looking thing with a deer skull and huge antlers on its head, and also spooky bones, and it looks mossy and old and creaky, and it can summon wolves, and its clothes are raggedy, and it has ivy growing on its legs, and it's like, yeah, I'm a tree. Now let's take this bomb-ass design and put it in, I don't know, Mount Doom, and suddenly it looks pretty dumb. And that's because the Leshen was designed around the environment you can find it in. Even its height was chosen to make it look as creepy as possible, because if your eyes dart over it too fast, it blends in with the other trees, but oh wait, it's not a tree, look out. I just think this monster is so awesome, and so much thought was clearly put into it. It takes work to be thoughtful about how to make your monster look like a product of its environment. It also makes the environment look more believable, further increasing the immersion, because now this forest isn't just a regular old forest, it's the ancient forest with its ancient history, an ancient way of being, and ancient creatures. Setting really means immersion. Another one of my favorite monsters is the Chocobo from Final Fantasy. I mean, just look at it. The Chocobo has many forms, and each one of them is just as adorable as the last, but we're gonna focus on the Chocobo in Final Fantasy 15 because it's just such a great example. I really love the Chocobo's simplistic and down-to-earth design. It's just so huggable. There's definitely something to be said about the effectiveness of simple and understated design, but I especially love how the function of the Chocobo is telegraphed. Now, the first thing we notice when we break down the Chocobo is its clear asymmetry. It's a very front-heavy bird, which gives off the impression that it could fall over unless it keeps moving forwards to catch itself. Next, we notice its wings that are very clearly too small to support flight for its chunky body. Then we notice its strong and stable legs in the shape of a horse's hind legs, and finally we notice that its back is flat and broad. And all of these design clues lead us to conclude that the Chocobo is the perfect Christmas dinner mount. The Chocobo's function in a lot of Final Fantasy games is to act as a mount to get you from place to place. You can even put armor on it so that it can be like, I'm a armored chicken. The Chocobo looks so good. Koichi Ishii from the Final Fantasy design team really pulled off like one of the most awesome designs I've ever seen. I think monster designs are more effective when the monster looks like it does what it's actually supposed to do. It makes the monsters more believable. For example, why would the Chocobo have larger wings? Just because, even if that would look cool. It doesn't need larger wings. Simplicity is key here, and the Chocobo really only has what it needs to fulfill its function as a cute rideable chicken. Monsters are really great at giving us emotional responses, whether those responses are being convinced there's a monster in your closet or wanting to squeeze something to death because it's too cute. And I think the best monsters are the monsters that give us the strongest emotional responses because they're the ones that make the strongest impression on us. So let's talk about our feelings for a second, and let's take a look at one of my favorite scary monsters, the Monstrosity of Sin from Dark Souls 3, which makes me feel a big no. Nah. No, not today. No. I don't know how the design team made this calamity so, but they really did, and I love it, but I hate it, and I want to burn my eyes out, and we're moving on now. On the complete other end of the spectrum, we've got one of my favorite cute monsters, Eevee, and I just want to be Eevee's friend. Like, it's so fluffy and cuddly, and it has this nice bushy tail and big ol' eyes and cute little paws. This is probably the trickiest foundation of monster design, if not the most subjective one. But there are a handful of great monsters I can point out that do a great job at making an impression on us. The Well Shark or Shark Giant from Bloodborne is disturbing and I hate it, but also come back I love you. The Mossless Gubu from Final Fantasy is hilarious and makes me laugh. The Necromorphs from Dead Space make me want to climb into a hole and never come out. Waddle Dee makes me want to stick my hand out to the passenger seat if I brake too fast because I'm taking care of you. All of these monsters are super memorable because of how strong our emotional response to them is. I wish I knew what the secret formula to making a monster that is emotionally resonant is, but I think more than anything, it's just a combination of context, setting, and how many eyes it has. And finally, some of my all-time favorite monsters are monsters that make me want to ask more questions. Monsters that make me want to learn more details. These are the monsters that really pull me into the world. And these are the monsters that really etch themselves into my memory forever. Because these are the monsters that always end up being the coolest. Gaius is probably one of my favorite examples of this. Why is it so big? Why does it have cool carvings? Why do its eyes glow? How does it make noise? Why does it have fur? There's nothing quite like the feeling of being chased around by something completely unexplainable and gigantic while yelling at the top of your lungs like a giddy child. I mean, just look at the design. It's honestly beautiful, and it makes me want to learn more about the world it inhabits and understand how such a creature could come into being. Another one of my favorite mysterious monsters is the Guardian from Breath of the Wild. Something about its design just captures my imagination every time I see it. I love the shape of its head, how it attacks, how it moves. It just makes me want to learn more about the civilization that built it. The mystery factor really is what keeps people coming back and wanting to uncover more. It's the secret spice that makes the coolest monsters the coolest. The ones that hit you right in the childlike wonder and amazement. There's so much thought that goes into designing the best monsters, and monsters are great, and I think they're worth celebrating, and hopefully after all this, you can see why I like them so much and why you should too. So I was really curious about what you guys like to see in your monsters, so I asked what characteristics were your favorite on Twitter, and the responses were definitely insightful. A lot of you guys love seeing horns on your monsters, and I agree. Horns are dope. A lot of people like either no eyes or too many eyes, and again, I have to agree. Both of these make for some pretty dope monsters. There were a few mentions of big mouths. Absolutely, the big mouth aesthetic is super good for monster designing, just because I think it always taps into that primal fear we have of being eaten. I especially like when there are many small teeth. People also seem to really like big teeth. Disproportionate bodies were also a popular characteristic, and I agree. I mean, there's nothing that quite tickles the scary bone like an arm that can touch you from a football field away. Cyrenik says he likes to see a large on his monsters, and I mean, we're all into something. I don't even know how to reply to this. I'll link the thread down below, so you can feel free to contribute to the monster love. Next, I wanted to bring your disgusting amalgamation to life, so I hit up a talented artist designer and we workshopped a monster based on your feedback, and this is what we got. Hi, thanks so much for watching my video. I really appreciate it. It's probably the hardest video I've ever worked on. So, a lot of people have been asking me to sell shirts, so I thought, you know what, I'm gonna start selling shirts. So if you'd like to help support the channel, you can consider getting a shirt. I wanted them to be as high quality as possible, while still being pretty affordable, because $30 for a YouTube shirt? Uh-oh, stinky. Thanks so much for everything, and I'll see you again soon. Okay, bye.